Thank you, Amar. Thank you, Anuj, for joining us. Thanks to the overall Wall team. It has been definitely, we have seen you guys are creating something which is, I think, is pretty much required because people need to understand what goes on chain. And for people who are unaware of how to read transactions, right, it becomes easier when you can follow certain wallets or certain communities, right, to make decisions both in terms of investments or to in terms of building or connecting with the community. Welcome to the our Web3 One is to One show. We'll be discussing social networks and the on-chain social insights and things which can help you, and why our social interactions are becoming different, like from Web2 to Web3, how they are changing. Welcome, Anuj. Welcome, Umar. It's certainly our pleasure. Please feel free to introduce yourself and talk about what Wall.app is building and why you and how this idea started from, like where it all started from, and how its overall experience has been until now.
Sure. Hey guys, my name is Anuj. I'm the co-founder at Wall. Wall is a social discovery platform for Web3 at large. Firstly, we started with NFTs on Ethereum. The idea is that you can go onto the platform and see what NFTs people who you like follow or buying right now, and like what are their collections like, and kind of discover new people through different communities. So for example, let's say I want to know what collections people in Cool Cat community are mostly buying these days and want to check that out. I can just go see that. Or you want a specific wallet, you can go see that. And the key idea is that largely NFT as a as an asset class is primarily very similar to that of a Rolex or a sneakers or that kind of a culture which is existing before the whole Web3 scene. And if we look at how those things have been happening, it's quite similar in a sense. There is a limited scarce resource, and then like a lot of people want to get it, and like the cooler that thing becomes, the more sort of pricier it gets, right? So it is also about what are some of the things that your friends are buying, and that kind of a subculture or sub communities that forms around that. So we started with just trying to understand the space. What are the things that's going to be be prevalent in coming future, and something which we thought is that the social discovery aspect of things when it comes to NFT world is going to be something which is very interesting to explore, and that's how we started with Wall.
So I'll just probably add one on top of that, right? Predominantly, the ecosystem has changed a lot after like NFTs blew up. I think when DeFi summer came, people thought this could be the opportunity to onboard the next billion people, but not a lot of sound was made or noise was made about it. I think that was predominantly because of the behavior of the asset class itself. Uh, these are things that you don't talk about once you probably like perform a transaction. On the other hand, NFTs perform exactly the opposite way. Someone purchases an NFT, they're probably the loudest people on internet, and fairly so. The asset class itself has brought in a lot of newcomers into the ecosystem. So, unfortunately, making sense of things that are happening on chain is currently only limited to Etherscan, and that too, mostly people use it for just getting confirmation on their transaction. That was where we strongly built our thesis that there is a requirement for a social layer itself, and we'll eventually, I think during the course of the conversation, we can come on to the current user behavior as well.
DeFi Summer was able to do was build a liquidity, bring more liquidity to the ecosystem, right? But apparently it was place which was largely involved on the DeFi's summer, or the people who are largely involved were, the or the people who have, larger sum of assets to invest, right? Because then only you can make more from the farming part. And it was definitely not for a retail guy. But what NFTs have done different is basically you have these communities where you can simply contribute, and get rewarded with an NFT, right? And with a very minimum price to mint. So I think that has changed completely how people can get involved at large, and also because it has a social presentation attached to it. So because in DeFi you can't say, okay, I have this stake in over here. You can just share your hash or something, or show something on chain. But this NFT has added more of social layer to it, where people can present it, people can apply it to their profile pictures, they can showcase it to their friends. I think that has added more to the fire, and it has brought the traction which was required to the blockchains. I hope you guys will agree to that.
Absolutely. And I think it's NFTs as an asset class is very interesting because
True.
I think you touched upon a few aspects, and one of the other things which I also found very interesting about NFTs is often people are buying into the culture. And also, like for example, Amarnath has this Atom Bomb Squad NFT, which is done by a company, I think the Hundreds, which is a large uh, retail merchandise company which has existed for over a decade or plus. And now they are primarily into culture building, and they have been doing merchandise business for a while. And so NFTs is another asset class where which they are exploring from their standpoint, and from a user standpoint, I think um, it's like a limited scarce item from a brand which is has been a premium brand. So that brings in a very interesting dynamic where people are buying it for social use cases than just buying a typical stock. At the other on the other end, they're also like financial investment instruments, right? So from that standpoint, also they function very differently from ERC20s, where they are like sort of limited in number. They're illiquid to a certain extent. So these things bring very interesting dynamics, where for which has both positives and negatives, and where one thing can just basically become an illiquid JPEG overnight if sort of the community folks themselves or rugs, or um, the positive part is also you are more prone to seeing 30, 40, 50% swings in an asset, and people don't paper hand it that easily because they don't end up panic selling that much compared to an ERC20.
Exactly. I think you have touched upon pretty solid points where basically I think ERC20s were facing a lot of issues because it's liquid and you can transact today, right? I mean, like right now, right away. I think JPEGs add more of a value to it where people wait, hold to it, hold on to the asset, and wait for the moment when they can, or probably put those higher sell prices, and then also, like, I mean, like, a lot of people are pretty attached to these pieces, right? People like I hold this MAYC, so I'm pretty attached to it. So now I'll probably sell it or not, right? Maybe. So I think that adds an emotional value also to it, to the overall holding. But I think let's keep the holding aside and let's talk more about how on-chain social analysis are reading these wallets, and now we can see a social layer being built on top of it, where people don't have to go manually and search for addresses and listen to these addresses or these communities, what decisions they are making, what assets they are getting into. And I think you guys are very simply solving that problem, and which makes it easier for a novice to make those decisions. So I would like to learn more about how you have observed, because human is a social animal, right? And we like to connect with people, we like to watch what other people are doing. How do you think it is evolving in sense of Web3, and how people are making decisions with respect to watching these wallets, and how you have observed overall the perception, how it has changed from just listening to Twitter, and moving from Twitter to an on-chain listening kind of thing?
So I think the decision making so far has been a mix of both, right? Like it is a mix of on-chain information and off-chain information. There are certain pointers that you look for when you're looking at a particular collection's Twitter account, or to see who are the mutual followers that I have. There are some level of basic hygiene checkups that you individuals do. Apart from that, then the places from where you've probably heard about the project also like matters a lot. Um, so off-chain information plays a lot of role. A lot of people spend a lot of time on Discord as well. That being said, it is not just that. Sometimes it is important to keep an eye on what some of these whale wallets are doing as well. They typically have the same behavior as ICO projects. The moment they're launched, the pre release, of like until all the NFTs are revealed, the pre-reveal, the price generally goes up to like 2x. After the reveal, it comes down a little. After that, based on the performance, the project keeps going up. At some point, you'll have whales enter and sweep floors of around like 10 or 15 or 20. So that is essentially the accumulation phase that used to happen in the ICO bubble. And then suddenly you have like a lot of influencers or people who are having who can drive users are talking about the project, and typically the project's utility and then later gets manifested, and then the price eventually shoots up. So these are like patterns which have happened so far. I think the ecosystem is also following these patterns, like having a mix of both on-chain information and off-chain information. I think is what is, I think, most important to make a decision.
Anuj, would you like to add to that?
The on-chain identities sort of people are forming also a very interesting dynamic, because your wallets are by design pseudonymous in nature, right? So, and which is a very interesting thing when it comes to sort of people, because often people themselves are different personalities in different contexts, and wallets allow for that. And for a person in real life, that option of segregating those things is more of a social game, but here it becomes a choice on chain. So that brings in a very interesting dynamic where I can have multiple pseudonymous identities and still reveal myself as one of them. And I think this has very interesting um, implications for a social network too, because essentially, if you remember, maybe when the Orkuts of the world were there, or the first earlier Yahoo chats, people used to have all these different names, and people used to chat, and like there was a very interesting social dynamic that develops over that. And I think that kind of a where people, I think, depending on how the community is built, it can range anywhere from toxic to really collaborative. So, from a social network standpoint, I think this has a very interesting kind of behaviors that would happen on the platform, which we are yet to really test out and see and what pans out. But I think one thing which we can definitely see is it's going to be very different from, let's say, a Twitter social network, because where it is exactly the opposite, where the stakes are super high, your identity is at stake and your reputation is at stake for every post that you put. Like, and we have seen this happen over and over again, where doxed sort of community members have been their old 10 years earlier Twitter posts have been taken out and they've been deshamed. So so this allows for an expression of thoughts in a much more open way, but it has a certain cost of um, you know toxicity or other kinds of things which can potentially happen. Having said that, one thing which also becomes a very interesting dynamic is, like, just like at some point in time we were not okay to share our pictures with anyone else other than our close group, but then today we are okay with sharing our information with everyone in the world, right? Pretty much. And I think that kind of a dynamic is going to come to money and assets, which is a big social change, because often money has been something people are like, I don't want to show off how much I have, sort of a thing. but invariably with on-chain identities, everything public. So these two sorts of things bring in a very interesting dynamic for what would happen on a Web3 social network.
Pointed out some good things where you mentioned how overall communication has been previously, where we had these the Orkut days and the Facebook and the Twitter, right? I think a lot of it has changed with the Web3, where you have more of addresses where you listen to these addresses, you connect with these addresses, or connect with these people who hold these addresses, right? And I think these events have happened in recent past as well, where people were put down or people were targeted basis these activities that they did previously. And I think like it has completely now changed because people are now pseudo anonymous. They have a different identity. So people, but it adds some level of where people need to understand what needs to be done and what not. But that ultimately comes to how people are reacting to things also. Next point would be, why do you think this this evolution from a centralized social network to a decentralized social network is or was important, uh, and taking into account of what has happened in past with respect to these Facebook hacks and all these data privacy issues that has happened previously.
I think first and foremost, I think data ownership was the first thing, and second thing was privacy. Um, Data ownership is something which Web3 is well poised to solve because of like the DIDs and like your on-chain identities and all data being public, and hence the way to monetize that data is also going, which can be potentially linked to the user directly. So and ownership from that standpoint of being able to monetize and the user getting a reward from that standpoint. Yes, and when it sort of comes to privacy, it's an interesting conundrum because um, typically a Web3 social network is trying to put out information in a decentralized way, which um, then would needs to be like that information needs to be encrypted and stored, and um, which not necessarily is foolproof. So and maybe some of this information, like for example some of the social networks that have been building are kind of built it in open way where like it's accessible and like composable. So there are these different ideas about what a Web3 social network or how the data layer of a Web3 social network needs to be, and some of them are contradictory. Like some people would say, okay, let's keep everything open, accessible, composable. That's a very different ideology from saying that okay, let's give that ownership. Sorry, let's keep that in an encrypted format and keep it only accessible as a private this thing to people. And I think one thing about sort of Web3 social is going to be there is different for different context, just like you have different identities, you're going to have different conversations, and each needing a different kind of a social network in a sense of how they store data or that data monetization happens. Amar, maybe you want to add something there?
Definitely, there were good things that came out of Web2 social, right? Like there is no two ways around denying the fact that what Facebook built has not been useful. Like for the fact that social became really popular is the reason why so many other social platforms came, catering to different niches one after another. When people started basically figuring out, okay, this is a niche which requires a different product by itself. Onboarding billions of people onto internet itself because people are excited to like just connect with each other like on Facebook or Instagram or you know these kinds of things were possible only because of why Facebook has existed. Credit is where it's due. But that being said, at that time of when they were building the technology, obviously they did not have access to this kind of decentralized systems. So they had to rely on traditional equity-based companies where value capture happens in an organization, and it's the motive is to enhance, you know, shareholder value. Obviously, fundamental economics of how the game was played then were different. And at that point, when the organization becomes as big as Facebook does, there will be some leaks that will happen, which turned out to be fatal for the brand itself. And so much so that they had to like rebrand, and still they had took a lot of heat for what they're doing. So I think we are now in an era where we can really not just look at a particular activity as something which is being done for a vanity effect. Like mostly people are posting on Instagram or Facebook because they want to tell their friends and followers about what they're doing. The fundamental difference that is happening in Web3 ecosystem is add a financialization layer to it. You're playing games with people that you want to be a part of the guild and win some money. You want to stake money with people who are, ready to create a liquidity pool, or you want to like be a part of a community which has the same NFT whose value is XYZ. So these are typically how I find like this next generation of social networks to be formed, and not how current Web2 social networks have evolved so far.
Definitely, I mean, like these changes that happen because of Facebook, after the era of all good, I think definitely that those are appreciated. But they had their fair side of backlash because of the actions they took. And I think now we are moving towards an era of where people open their data. So it was just, you don't own your data, you just read or write something. But now you can basically own the data that push something on chain. You own that data, right? So basically NFTs or these transactions that happen. So I think that has changed a lot from what it was, and I agree to that part. Coming to the next, connected with our previous conversation, and I would like to understand how you have seen, overall interest increasing in the people who you speak with very frequently, from moving, and moving from a centralized social network to a decentralized social network, or probably using Wall.app to, interact and make decisions. What has been the recent growth, or how your overall interactions has been in past few months? Because we have seen the Defi summer, and we have seen NFT season altogether, and I think that added a lot to the overall growth. But how you have seen overall exposure, how what level of growth you have seen in past few months?
Yeah, I think firstly, in terms of Web3 social networks, where um, the activity of social activities move into sort of platforms like Wall or any other social platform, we are a bit too early, to be honest, because largely the interest in people has been to find the next big flip. And this is typically the case in any sort of big bull market, right? Like people are just trying to find that quick flip, and usually the social or these behaviors would get unlocked once things settle down a bit, and then more people are really delivering on the roadmaps and sort of seeing what's happening and what are the projects which actually are delivering, and that builds a sort of a echo chamber effect uh, within those communities and your friend circles, what they keep talking about and things like that. And by friend circles I mean influencer. Essentially anyone you follow can be your friend. So um, in that context, I think we are a bit too early for the social activity. A lot of this still largely happens on Twitter, and then they go to other platforms like Discord notifications and things like that. So this part, some of the parts of this is what solve it, where you are getting on chain activity, and you are firstly, because largely the focus has been around finding big flip. Our first version of the product was built around that, with not much social engagement aspects on it yet. But we are starting to build pieces that would be the base for social engagement, is like community pages and kind of getting real-time updates on notifications on some of the projects that you already bought and want to keep a track of, but you don't end up keeping a track because Discord is just too noisy to get information across. And so to like I preface, basically people are coming flip, and specifically sort of talking about wall in terms of user growth and things like that. Largely, we have been first iterating on the see it as being able to give an end-to-end experience, and I think we have launched our private 1.5 month ago, and then we had an initial uh, burst of people who have come and checked out the product, and from that we had a certain amount of feedback, and based on those inputs, now we are iterating and building the set of version. So largely we didn't push heavily on the front, mainly because we are just in that sort of figuring out the first big feature or use case for which people would keep coming. And I think right now, with the sort of market slowing down a little bit, we are starting to see the notifications for updates of the projects and these sorts of things having more relevance for a product like us. So I think over the next few months is going to be where we are going to be heavily activating from wall stand. But I think at large, for a social Web3 platform, we are quite early.
Got it. Amar, would you like to add to that?
Sure. So I'll probably break down a typical social media post and then look at where we are in terms of like how we are trying to like look at Web3, a part of it, right? So let's look at, if you look at an Instagram post, you have the post itself. Now, if you look at it as an image or a video, that is synonymous to the NFT. Now we have all those NFTs. Second, you have the profile. Now, now this is where a lot of people are trying to build solutions, which is trying to build an identity for yourself. Now that identity can be an Ethereum address, it can be like a mix of bunch of addresses that you have, people who want to show, who don't want to show. It depends on multiple factors over there. The third aspect of it is the social interactions in it, right? Like the like, comment, and all of these things. Now, typically in the ecosystem that we are building, people are expecting composable pieces of it, which means on a particular platform, if there are like 20 comments, they would want to like probably carry around some cloud of these onto like the other platform as well, or carry around all the followers that they have on from one platform to another platform as well. So people are building so these different pieces as well. So like Anuj has mentioned, like for it to 100% see fruition, there is still time, because there are all these different pieces which are still protocols which have started building their V0s. So for it to like truly take off, I would expect anywhere between 2 to 3 years to see like the first native Web3 decentralized social applications. There are social behaviors which can be factored into to be made applications on top of these asset classes.
Also, to just lay some context, Decentraland, which is probably the most popular metaverses, has about like 1,000 daily active users. So that's nothing, right? Like compared to the web to socials. And so of course, like metaverse being a very subsection of overall Web3, but just to kind of uh, it gives us a context of where we are in adoption.
I think you said it right. I mean, like we are still pretty early, and a lot of these use cases or these applications, these ideas are constantly iterating, and we are seeing a lot of development in that sense. And I think it will take us good 2 years, as Amar said, to see the first decentralized social network to be out there and standing upright against these centralized social networks. But I think we are still not there. We still take some more time to be there. But I appreciate and what you guys have built. As of now, I have personally tried the product. I think what you guys have built, definitely people should from our community should definitely go out and try Wall.app today, because they will be able to experience how to listen to these wallets very easily and their activities. Like,
just quickly to add something, basically one thing which I would like kind of suggest to go into Wall is, let's say you have a friend or a person, that an influencer or anyone that you'd like to see what is up to. You can just go to Wall, type their Ethereum address. We are just releasing the, you'll be able to get that wallet and you can follow that wallet. And whenever that wallet buys something, you can get notified by that. So I think that's one of the most simplest use cases which we've seen people would want to use. And then you can also start seeing different communities.
Got it. So let's talk about. I mean, recently we have also observed that people are targeting, because scams are pretty smart. These people are way ahead of what we think could be done, right? So we have observed that people are targeting these wallets, like what Pranksy is doing and what Jimmy is doing, and simply airdropping their NFTs to these wallets, or they're smartly buying through their name, right? And people are literally following these wallets and they're getting scammed, right? So what could be your one suggestion on that front?
So yeah, I mean, so I think I have burned my hands with this firstly. So because when I was trying to test this hypothesis, I just like FOMO'd, like I saw this guy buying this, like fuck, this is gonna be amazing. I want to buy this, and I bought it, and it was just burnt. And then it's good that the first thing that I did FOMO in buying, because then we understood this is a problem, and we basically, there is a way to identify these transactions. These transactions are on chain very different from, let's say, a buy their own wallet, where basically some other wallet interacts with the contract and the minting happens to this wallet. So we have actually segregated these transactions as airdrops, and we have removed them from the. So any transaction that you see on the feed on Wall is some the user has interacted with, whether it's a send, receive, bought, or sold.
That's awesome. I think it would be a savior for the community now, right? Because I have seen people, they going out and saying, Xy's, Jimmy is buying this or Pranksy is buying this. I've got this, and then 2 days after that, they are like, yelling on them. So it's pretty important to understand what's legit. And I think you guys are doing fantastic job over there. And I think from the community itself, people should go ahead and follow these influencers, not through OpenSea, but instead of that, go and follow these influencers or these thought leaders through Wall.app, because then it will give you contextual understanding what's happening on chain, right? So so that brings me to the last question of the talk, which is more about talking about alpha, right? So what are you guys up to in next 3 to 6 months? What is coming from your end, guys?
Yeah, so I think first, what we have basically built on the back end is data indexes for Ethereum, essentially. We are monitoring chain and kind of getting all the transactions that happen. From there, we are able to pinpoint and pick any wallet and kind of see what are their transactions doing. So now, if you just think about what are the different things that we could be doing from that, one is, of course, monitoring directly on chain, identify sorts of patterns in that. That would translate to identifying a new collection that's popping, to data of a deep understanding of the data of a particular collection slash community. Look at their holder distribution, the composition of that. Are there any sort of major whales, things like that? So to get an understanding of how robust a collection is, from almost like a technical chart kind of understanding that would happen in a ERC20, but I think what we are trying to do there is really make it like simple, easy to consumable from like almost like a Web2-ish social experience sort of a way. So presenting data in that sense is one of the things that we're working on. The other thing is basically also to understand a, a profile of a person, so to speak. Basically, the advantage of and it being on chain and being public is that your all on chain activity is public, and hence that so it's almost like, imagine like if what if Facebook data is public, right? Like all the things that you could be doing with that data is something which is open for anyone to do, and that is one of the things that we want to also focus on is being able to create different personas for people. And I think this is going to be very relevant for even from collection standpoint or new project standpoint, that they want to specifically be able to talk to certain people, so to speak. And I think that's the thing we are sort of we are yet to figure out the specifics of how that would translate as a product or a feature. But the idea is like there is a lot of interest for people to figure out what's the next good project, and from a project standpoint, people they would also want to know who are some long-term holders. They would want them to be part of their community. So I think the community formation aspect of it are slightly random. I wouldn't say completely, because they're doing allow list and whitelist big projects. I think that's one way of sort of quote unquote targeting. But I think there are more better, robust ways to do it, because all the things is available. I think that is also one of the things that we're interested in exploring. Subsequently, community updates and keeping track with roadmaps is one of the problems that we see is going to be prevalent as sort of market goes into the next cycle, where people are not no more that much interested in buying the next big, but how can they be part of the community, or how can they kind of get value from the collections which they've invested in. So I think that is a bigger picture of sort of what we are looking at for the next 3 to 6 months. Maybe Amar, you want to add something which I'm.
I think you summarized it.
Awesome. And I think we have learned a lot what you guys are doing. Probably like this is probably a personal question. Right? I think reputation in a centralized network is more about the social value that person has created or the social proof that person already has, right? And I think in on chain or in a Web3 native way, and I think that is pretty difficult for a person to figure out what could be the social value of it. And I think holding assets or buying into assets which are kind of like long haul, where people are just holding them or collecting them. How do you think this overall reputation thing will work? And do you guys are also looking into building a reputation system or a reputation score around what people are doing and how they are interacting with blockchain?
Reputation score is kind of a interesting frame, but I think when you try to consolidate that in, I think things often get missed. So I'm not really sure specifically being able to consolidate to a single number, but I think largely there will be definitely be profiles. Like I might be a metaverse enthusiast versus a merchandise enthusiast, and these sorts of profiling is something which we are definitely interested in. I wouldn't, because reputation always needs a scale on which you're measuring things, and there needs to be 100 and a 0. What is 100 is very subjective.
Exactly. Yep. And I think that is what I was interested in here. I think what you have mentioned from the perspective of not just doing that, like profiling. I think that makes sense for a project like yours, because you have different activities happening in different projects. So measuring that, I think it would be pretty difficult, and giving them a reputation be little trickier. Okay, that's it from my end. I think it has been a fantastic talk. Thank you, Anuj. Thank you, Amar.
Awesome.
We really loved your, and we thank you for coming onto our stage.